the second press conference of today, and this is where we get to meet the Numenorians. Now, I'm going to go through this one by one so you can hopefully get it right. So it's Cynthia Addai-Robinson as Queen Regent Miriel.
Yes.
It's Lloyd Owen as Elendil.
Yes.
It's Ema Horvath as Arianne.
Arianne.
Trystan Gravelle as Pharazôn.
Pharazôn, yes.
Okay. Leon Wadham as Kemen.
Perfect.
And Maxim Baldry as Isildur.
Yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that pronunciation.
Yeah. Okay, so we haven't yet met your characters in the episodes we've seen. Can you each go through a sense of who your character is and what Numenor is and where it stands in the story? Maybe if I start with you, Cynthia.
Sure. So I am playing Queen Regent Miriel, and she is essentially the leader of the island kingdom of Numenor. And essentially, the clue is in the name, Queen Regent. So we know that she isn't fully yet a queen. And she is cousin to Pharazôn. And essentially, she's trying to navigate Numenorians through this sort of shift in society. So when we are first introduced to Numenor, it's a time of relative peace. It's a kingdom at the height of its power and prosperity. But there's definitely a sense that there is a shift and a sort of a fork in the road moment. So as queen, she is trying to really maintain the stability, maintain that sense of peace, but and as is the case in any good drama, it's a bit more complicated than that, I would say.
Tristan, where's your character?
Yes, I play Pharazôn. He's cousin to Queen Miriel, the Queen Regent. He's also the Chancellor of Numenor, and he realises that Queen Miriel has an uphill task because Tar Palantir, Miriel's father, is still alive. He's ill, he's on his deathbed, but he's still alive, so she's always going to have people going, well, your father wouldn't have done this, your father wouldn't have done that. And I think this is where I come into it, is that I guess I get to perform a masterclass in social cohesion on the island of Numenor, where there's, I guess, a marriage of thoughts and ways between the Regency and the people of Numenor.
Emma, who are you and what do you play in Numenor?
Arianne is the baby in a very important family. Her big brother Isildur is very famous in the legendarium. She's an aspiring architect who likes to draw, but when we meet her, she's kind of dealing with the loss of their mum and trying to be the mother figure that has left the family to her older brother, which has its challenges, is inappropriate in some sense, but also necessary. And her relationship with her father is kind of interesting. She gets overlooked because she's the less troublesome of the two siblings, and that leaves her kind of vulnerable to attention from other sources.
Now, Maxim, you're quite a famous name in mythology. What is your take on the character of Isildur?
He's a complex one, I think, because you kind of have an idea of where he's going, where he's heading to. But in the first season, you see him as a sort of misfit on the island of Numenor. He's a sailor trying to fulfill his father's Elendil, his legacy and dream of becoming a sea captain like himself. But he doesn't really want that. So I think there's an element of being lost and there's an emptiness in him. And he's just trying to find himself in the first season. And he does so in ways that maybe leave a path of destruction in his wake.
Okay. Lloyd, so you've got a couple of troublesome children. How are you dealing with the situation?
Like most parents. It's not my fault. Nothing to do with me. It's all their mother. What can I tell you? Elendil is capable sea captain in Numenor. They are a family of renown because of their bloodline, but he's very much suffering from being a widow, trying to deal with the adult children who are also grieving, and moved the family from the west of Numenor into the capital city. But essentially, as Cynthia was saying, there's the beginning of a schism on the island of Numenor. So there's a beginning polarization, and that's also replicated in the family. So he's being drawn in to that political melee. And there's a battle between his head and his heart. His pragmatic head wants to keep him and his family safe and keep life simple, and his heart is being drawn into the politics of Numenor because he's attached instinctively to that battle. So that's where he is at the beginning of the season.
And Leon, who were you in this great tableau of family and country?
I play Kemen. I'm Farazon's son, and Kemen likes the idea of following his father into politics, but Farazon has seen a lot. Kemen has seen next to nothing. He's lived a charmed life up until this point. He doesn't necessarily understand the reality of politics at this point. So he's surviving on ideas and passion and charm alone, and is about to meet a rude awakening.
Okay. Now, what kind of Tolkien research, boot camp, kind of immersion did you have to do to get into your characters? Maybe start with Cynthia.
I think it was a mix for me because, you know, I'm one of the characters that exists in the lore, but I think what's been a real opportunity, and in terms of what JD and Patrick, our showrunners and the producers and everybody involved in this collaboration, it's really about trying to fill in some of the gaps, because sometimes you're working off of, you know, a little bit of a description depending on the character. You know, some characters are quite filled out in the lore. Others, such as myself, I'm working off of what I have. And then there's sort of both the research within the text and the lore. But to me, it was really about, I'll call it emotional research, or just that sense of what would a person in this scenario do? What have leaders throughout history faced in terms of navigating a society through a change in the time, in the season? So it was sort of both of those things and combining both of those ideas. But with a lot of these characters, you know the end point, and there's this circuitous route to sort of get there. And so I think that's where there's room to really try to bring, whether it's some of your own experience or your own ideas, or again, this sense of collaboration with everyone involved in making this. And with our directors as well, I think for me, there was a lot of really discovering this character in the moment and in these scenarios. And it was really about the relationships between these characters, you know, and sort of how do they relate to one another, and what sort of interesting moments does that bring.
How about Trystan? Did you delve deep into Tolkien's lore, or was it just too forbidding?
Yes, no, there was that. I did my fair share of reading in Tolkien's lore, but with what's interesting about a character like Farazon, I think what appealed to me is the geopolitics. And I think reading about how people get affected by their environment and by the geography around them, you get to learn an empathy, I guess, as to why people do what they do. And I think with somebody like Farazon, the Numenorians, just like everybody on Earth, I think we're all for globalization, but we want it on our terms. And that's what appealed to me, and that's what was very interesting. I think an author that stuck out to me was Tim Marshall with Worth Dying For and Prisoners of Geography. And it does teach you, I guess, that all history is a matter of perspective.
I guess with Numenor, it's a question for you all, really. Separate maybe from the rest of Tolkien, it's quite classical, isn't it? There's a sort of sense of ancient Greece and ancient Rome and empire about it that maybe gives it a different complexion to anything we've seen before. Lloyd?
Yes, I think that's right, and you see this civilization at its peak. It's a sort of utopia, or that was its genesis, and definitely a very egalitarian society. There's a hierarchy, but within that, like a Roman forum, everyone has a voice. We have scenes where people, you know, the townspeople contribute to the political debate. So in that sense, it's at its peak. I mean, this is very much Tolkien's Atlantis as well. That's how Numenor, how it originated in his imagination, and then he developed it from there. So it's, as Tolkien has said, everything is about the fall. So we see this peak civilization, and we begin to watch how vanity, ego, pride, ambition starts to undo the very fabric of society. And I'm not pointing any fingers at Farazon. I'm just saying, I just thought I'd put it out there, you know.
The question for Maxim is from Carlos from Cinema Comics in Spain. Your character has a great importance in the history of the Lord of the Rings. Were you a fan of Tolkien's novels before you made the show?
I wasn't actually I haven't read the books until I got the job. That's how my introduction was to the books. And I started reading the Silmarillion, where a lot of our characters are actually mentioned. And then it kind of led me down the path to really delve deeper into the text. And the whole fabric and tapestry of the world was so rich and amazing that really helped me bring my character alive.
Okay, so from Romain, from Le Journal du Dimanche. How helpful was it to work in real locations in New Zealand? Question for you all. Maybe Emma, you can start with that. How was New Zealand for you?
Oh, and it's stunning. Maxim and I, our first day was on this private beach, like up in the North Island.
In the Coromandel, yeah.
And I remember Maxim's hair and makeup took like 5 seconds. And he was out the trailer and had like a little chair, and he watched the sunrise on that day. And yeah, and then the city we built was incredible. Numenor, they actually built several blocks of it, and that was amazing because this city is supposed to be so incredible, and we didn't really have to imagine much of it. Yeah, I think we've talked about it ad nauseum, but there was algae in the canals, and bird poop and graffiti, and
the bird poop guy was amazing.
Yeah, that's
you just saw him standing there just painting the top of the buildings.
Is that how he's credited, bird poop?
Yeah, but also the crew. I mean, I think that was also like the most special thing about shooting down there. I miss several members of that crew.
Cynthia and I's first day was they got special permission from the I can't remember what they're called, the conservation area of New Zealand, essentially to use some of a mountain range, which is usually a 4-day hike to get in there. That's the only way you can get in, and we helicoptered up there on our first day. So that was very, very special, incredibly beautiful spot.
Imagine
which
if
you
it
might
been a hike.
Imagine. So yeah, wait till episode 70, see that one. Yeah, special.
Leon, how was your New Zealand experience? I mean, both on set and off set, did you have the full kind of environmental kind of adventure?
I mean, I'm a New Zealander.
So
I think on occasion I've taken my country for granted. I forget how special, how beautiful the place is, but also how special the people are. And it was really heartening for me to just hear over and over again doing this job with these people who'd come from all over the world that I should be cherishing my home. And I think it's reflected in the show. When I've seen it, I'm so proud of everyone's contribution. But yeah, I'm really excited for the rest of the world to be reminded of what we've got.
This is a question for Lloyd from Carlos in Spain. We met Elendil at the Battle of Mordor. What are we going to learn about this character that's different? So we've seen him at the end of the things. What are we going to learn about at the beginning?
I mean, it's a really good question, and that is the great privilege, excitement, as well as responsibility of playing this role. Again, as Cynthia was saying earlier, Tolkien has put these sort of signposts along the way through the Legendarium of where these characters, of events that happen to them. But what we don't know is how they get there, the fully rounded human being that is Elendil. And look, my eternal question, and I tease Maxim about this, but it's just, you have to pose. So Isildur at the end does not throw the ring into the fire. If Elendil had the ring, would he throw it into the fire? And I think that's what Tolkien would have opened up more and more is the fully rounded human being, what it is about each individual that either would make them make that decision or not. And you can apply that to every character sitting down here, which one of them would and wouldn't want to take possession of that ring or let it go. And that sort of working out who Elendil is through this whole series is what I'm really excited to play, as well as it's costing me a fortune in bribes to JD and Patrick as to how they write him, but I'm willing to make the investment.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? One of the great themes Tolkien says is the fallibility of men. And so I wonder, is there any kind of rivalry with all the actors playing these perfect elves who get everything right and you never make a mistake? That you guys have to be the earthy ones, the real ones with flaws.
But it's such a wonderful misconception that the elves never make any mistakes. If you read your lore, you will learn about Fëanor, and they're just a terrible bunch, aren't they? They're, full of ego, pride. We like to think of them as the aristocracy, who are very entitled.
I think it's because they're so similar to us as well, the elves, you know, is that we do begrudge them their mortality, because you wouldn't go down to the sea and begrudge the immortal jellyfish anything, would you? You know, but it's because they're so similar to us, and we know that they're going to live forever, and yeah, that rubs us up the wrong way, I think.
And you will also see some of that play out as well. I think in season 1, when you have an understanding of what happens when there is that introduction or that reminder that Númenóreans have those elvish roots, and how certain people feel about that within society, because, you know, there are some people who want to maintain that sense of tradition. They don't want to lose that part of their history. But, you know, the rest of society feels like, you know, we want to progress, move forward, tear down the old to build the new. So it's interesting in that that's sort of one aspect of this sort of political intrigue that you'll really see play out through season 1.
This is a question for Emma. How does it feel to be part of a legacy that already has a cult-like fan base? Tell us something about your journey and coming on board. It's from Ahmed from Seatown in Egypt.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you say yes to a project and you celebrate, and then sort of the seriousness of the fan base sets in very, very quickly. Yeah, I've mentioned this in a couple interviews. I spent a lot of time on the Reddit threads. I thought that was the quickest way in to the fan base. And yeah, that's been very eye-opening, but I've also found quite a few like acquaintances and friends that way. I don't think the fan base is as I don't know, the stereotypes are close-minded or precious or whatever. I haven't found that to be the case overall. And yeah, I think my journey was diving into the sort of the abyss of that, despite people telling me not to, and actually having a really wonderful experience.
Okay, so a question from Karim from Cairo Scene. Fans have read about Númenor and heard of it. What excites you most about them finally getting to see the Kingdom Island?
It's a great question. When we went to Comic-Con, one of the members of our security team was walking us back from it, and she said, "I'm not allowed to talk to you. I've been told not to talk to the actors because I mustn't geek out too much. I'm a massive fan." I'm saying, come on, let's have a geek out. And her parents were Lord of the Rings fans. She'd read the books herself. They'd even read the Silmarillion. They went to see the movies when she was old enough to take it. And she'd seen up to episode 3 when Númenor was introduced. So she knew all about Númenor from what she read. And she said the first time I saw it, she said, I just burst into tears, and I was delighted and relieved, because oftentimes, you know, we all have the strength of our imagination when we read something. I know I definitely did when I read The Hobbit as a kid, but so it's often hard to beat that. But the idea that she lived with Númenor in her head, and when she finally saw it, it made her cry, was a really positive sign, I thought. So hopefully that will be replicated for many people. It's stunning the work that our production designer, and as well as all of the people that work in CGI, just filling out what we built. I think it's an absolute visual feast, that city.
There's the score as well.
Yeah.
I think that when you are first introduced to Númenor, there's this swell of music, and Barry McCreary, who's done our score, there's sort of different instrumentation for the different worlds. There's something about the music for Númenor too that, like, when the camera's sort of panning in, it just really takes your breath away. I mean, we didn't have the music with us when we were doing it, but when you sort of layer that on as well, just takes it to another level.
It's from Alex from National World in the UK. Did any of your previous roles, anything kind of loosely fantasy adjacent, help prepare you for this? Or was it totally unlike anything you'd done before? Let's start with Maxim.
I don't think you can compare this show to any other show that I've personally been on. It's expansive, and I think it's one of those like moments in time that you kind of, it's like a time capsule for me, that like it was a dream come true, and like I think as a kid my inner child was just dreaming of this moment. So yeah, very special, that I don't think it could compare to anything that I've personally done. I don't know about you, anything else?
The one through line I realized for me is that I have a tendency to play people with very few friends. And it's the same in this. Yeah, I just noticed that the other day.
Okay,
Obviously, the themes are universal. Tolkien's mythological themes are universal. It's ultimately about what it is to be human, the struggle and the difficulties of living. And I think, obviously, as an actor, you're going to come across that all the time. So there's plenty that's similar. And as Cynthia again was saying earlier about the emotional story is what you need to find, and that ultimately needs to replicate what it is to be alive, breathing in and out, and being human. So that if there's any consistent theme throughout it, I think it would be that.
Brilliant. Well, it's a lovely place to leave it. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.